Hey guys, my name is Mujahid, and this is the seventh and last episode of A Beginner's Guide to C++. And today's subject is inheritance. Now, you've probably realized that the audio isn't quite the same. It is because I'm using a different microphone to record, because the previous one just decided to die on me. I hope the audio doesn't somehow sound worse than how it sounded before. And if it does, I do apologize. But yeah, let's get into it. And first of all, let's explain what inheritance is. C++ allows classes to be used to create other classes that have the same attributes and methods, as well as additional attributes and methods on top. I'm going to explain it a little better in a moment. Now, some of the benefits of inheritance are the following. It allows us to use the same code multiple times. That means I don't have to write the same things over and over again or copy and paste the same code multiple times. It also improves the quality of code by making it more organized and readable. Now, if you have paid enough attention since the beginning of the series, most of the things we're talking about has something in common. They almost always improve the quality of code by making it more organized and readable, if you will. Now, the reason we always mention this is because the core of coding is solving problems. And as we all know, there are multiple ways to solve a problem. For example, if I want to go from point A to point B, I can just go in a straight line, or I can visit the point C before I reach the point B. There's a misunderstanding that using more complicated and hard to understand methods to solve problems make you look smarter and overall a better coder, but this is completely wrong. Yeah, sure, you can go to point B by visiting point C, point D, and point E, but you can also go in a straight line and not even visit those points. Not only does this make the whole process a lot faster, it also is more simple. If a person who doesn't really understand much from coding and syntax can look at your code and understand what your code does, then that means you've done a good job. Because in most of the bigger projects, you're not working alone. You're always working with an environment around you, and making things as simple and easy to understand as possible allows your coworkers or partners to work at a higher performance with you. When we say we are trying to make things more organized and readable and simple, this is what we're referring to. We are trying to make things as simple and easy to understand as possible so that people that are going to be looking through our code can also understand what we are trying to get. So always keep in mind that we are trying to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, I have a little graph in here, and I really do hope this doesn't make this whole thing a lot more complicated than it is. Think as if you have a base class and the class has an attribute named X. If you create subclasses under that, which you can create multiple subclasses of classes, those classes also will inherit the attribute X. So they are going to have attribute X even if you don't define them inside of the new subclass you've created. It also goes for methods, of course. The methods inside your base class also will be inherited for your subclasses. And you can also create subclasses of subclasses and have even more additional code stored in. Right now you can ignore all the red and blue code. And I've only defined X once, but we have 7 classes that actually have the attribute X inside of them. I've defined Y only once, but we have 3 classes that have the attribute Y. I've only defined method Z once, but we have 3 classes that have the same method. And of course, going for something like this is going to make your code much more organized than, let's say, defining a class, defining a couple of attributes, and then defining another class, defining same attributes on top of a couple of new added ones. You could have just inherited that from the first class. You didn't have to repeat yourself. Let's go to Visual Studio Code and see it with an example. Alright, we're back at Visual Studio Code, and before we begin, let's decide on a topic. Let's say we are working on a video game that is in a 2D environment and there are multiple entities, such as character you're playing and the enemies. Now, your player character and your enemies would have some stuff in common, and those would be that they're both in the environment, so they both have locations, they both have coordinates, they both can move. Now that we've decided what they share, we can go inside here and define a new class that is named entity. Now we can go under public and define double x and y, representing our coordinates. Let's also add a method named move, and have it take two parameters, integer move x and integer move y. And let's have this method increase the value of x by the amount of move x and do the same thing for y. Now when I call the function move, it is going to add move x amount of value on top of x and move y amount of value on top of y. Let's actually change this to double. I think it's going to be better that way. And now that we've declared double x, double y, and move function, let's create a new class that is named player. Now to inherit from the class entity, all we do is a column and we type public entity. After that, we go for curly brackets and define whatever attributes player we will have on top of the ones that are coming from entity. Let's go with something like double damage and health. Let's also give these values because it's kind of awkward that way. Let's have the damage 50 or something like that and health 100. Let's also give these values 0 and 0 as default. Now we can create another class that is going to inherit from entity, and this is going to be the class enemy. The way we inherit this is we go for column, we go public entity, and let's also have these enemies shoot at the player. So let's go with something like this. Before going inside the main function and creating the player and the enemy, I want to go back inside the entity and add a new method. Something like void its course. Okay, this will probably be good enough. We're gonna make the whole weaving the coordinates thing a lot easier. Now we can go inside the main function and create a layer, layer one, and an enemy, enemy one. Now we know that their coordinates are set to 0 by default. Let's have them placed in other locations. Layer one dot move. Inside here we give two double variables, move x and move y. Let's go with something like 15.25 and 25.15. And we can also move the enemy. Now I can get both of their coordinates. If I try to run the code, we can see that player's coordinates and the enemy's coordinates were given correctly. And we were able to use attribute x and y even though we haven't cleared them inside of the class player and the class enemy. Now let's also try to access the damage, health attributes as well as the shoot method. Damage and health are attributes that only exist under players, so only player objects have those attributes. Okay, I just realized that I haven't written those attributes under public, so let's fix that. It's kind of embarrassing, not gonna lie. Okay, these mistakes can, of course, happen, but what kind of teacher am I if I'm not showing you the mistakes you can do? Of course, I did it on purpose. What do you mean? Okay, let's get back inside main and let's also view the health at once. And while we're at it, let's also call the build method. Now, if I try to run the code, we can see all the values in the correct order. And that's what inheritance is about. You create classes, you create subclasses, and you can use the same attributes and methods for different classes. There's also one more thing that's worth mentioning in my opinion, which is the access specifier protected. It is basically doing what private does, but it also allows the attributes written under it's be inherited from the subclasses. For example, an attribute written under private wouldn't be inherited from other classes, but protected would be. I'm not going to use it in a code because this video is getting really long. So if you're interested, you can try it out for yourself. Alright, here's the question of the video. As always, the answer will be in the description. Please don't forget to try the things I did today for yourself because it is the best way of learning when it comes to programming. And that's about it. Take care.